Okay, I think it is working. We have a delay of how long? Oh wow, at least 20 seconds. Yeah, I think it's about 20 seconds delay. But let's just make sure that it actually works. As usual, I'm gonna check my channel. Okay, so it seems to be working. Just double checking that it actually has sound. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, seems to be working. Great. Okay. Well, just decided to connect a little bit earlier so that I have some time to set things up. As always, feeling always a little bit confused every time I need to do this. Um, okay, so this one is a little bit different, I guess. This stream. Hi Mahesh. I'd like to just do a bit of a different one. I wanted to reply to a few things that have been happening in the community. It was kind of going wild. Um, and I know that I'm a little bit late to the party because it's been a few weeks, I think, that this has been posted. And so I originally saw this post from an ex colleague, and then I saw that it's like becoming more and more popular, which is very sad, to be honest, because unfortunately, the person who is talking about this doesn't understand what they're talking about. And that obviously makes it, it's widespread. But to make sure you know what I'm actually talking about, let me show you what I have. So, okay. And I guess you want, yeah, there we go. Yeah, okay. So, um, we are talking about this post, Scrum is Cancer. And I actually have already talked about it in one of my emails. So if you're not yet subscribed to my newsletter, you should definitely do that. So the links should be somewhere in the description. But you can also go to scrummaster.com/free dash downloads. Anyway, so um, kind of coming back to that, what I wanted to also do actually, not only looking at this post, but I decided to go look into other posts on this topic and try to kind of see what are the criticisms of Scrum and what can we do, like how do you reply to those. And for those who have not been on my newsletter, obviously you haven't seen it, but just to kind of show you a little bit of what it is, right? Scrum is cancer, so that is the claim. And I actually saw one of the commenters on my one of the videos told me that, oh, there is a huge like a whole movement against Scrum or something, and that was a bit funny to me. I mean, I don't really understand how you can just hate a framework, as same as people are hating on safe or stuff like that. Makes zero sense to me. But basically, the essence of this post is that this person says Scrum is cancer and then proceeds to list 9 examples of things that have nothing to do with Scrum. So for me, it's like the same as saying, um, what can I say? Uh, I don't know, fitness is cancer. And the anecdote or an example of that would be, I don't like eating bananas. Like, have absolutely nothing to do with each other, right? And that was just kind of interesting for me because there's like, how much time do you have to do stuff like that, especially if you are like, okay, we brought professionals, we paid people. What did you do uh, personally to understand and to implement Scrum, right? So, interesting post, but I wanted to go over some other things. And I actually found this article from 2015. So it's been a while, as we say. Oh, my camera is working. It's been a while that people have been hating on Agile and Scrum. And what I think here it's actually interesting is that it doesn't talk about Scrum per se. It actually talks about Agile, so anti-Agile. So an interesting point here, right? And I found it interesting. So if you look at the kind of the post, it says Agile must be destroyed once and for all. Enough of the stand-up meetings, please just write some code, right? And what I found here, what was interesting is here on this part of the article, the author says stand-up meetings in Scrum, which they're not stand-up meetings, okay, a common Agile approach, um, are an annoying interruption at best, or at worst, one of the mechanisms of subtle control, where managers drive a team while giving the illusion of shared leadership. We should end Scrum and Agile, he says. We are developers, we write code. And I found this phrase especially interesting because that's actually not true. Here's what I mean by that. So we are developers, we write code. You are developers, you don't write code, you create products for your customers. And I think that is where that disconnect is. I don't know if you heard the story of, I read like 3 books and they were referring to this story in all 3 books. I guess it's a popular one. But basically, um, a man was going around, I don't know, like in Paris or something, and he sees one of the men's or being like moving rocks. So he comes over and asks, "Hey, what are you doing?" So the guy says, "Can't you see I'm moving rocks?" Right? He goes around the building, trying to find someone else. He asks someone else, "What are you doing?" And so he says, "Well, I'm stacking rocks and building a wall." He keeps going around trying to find others, and he asks finally one person, "And what are you doing?" And this person replies, "Well, we are building a cathedral." And so that's kind of basically what we're trying to say here is, right now, when we're talking about, oh, we're developers, we write code, you're basically that first person who says, "I'm just moving rocks, I don't care actually why," right? And it is a problem. So for me, um, it's really just kind of misunderstanding of what your role is. You can write code. And I think that also comes back to that busy work. I mean, we are all susceptible to constantly being busy, and you have been working on something all day, super busy, very stressed, and then at the end of the day, you look at what you've done and you're like, so what did I accomplish today? I have no idea. I was like, I was busy, but in the end, I didn't actually do anything. And I think that kind of comes back to that, oh, we're just writing code. Well, you can be writing code all you want. You might be writing code 12 hours a day without any stop, not even just stopping to eat or go to the bathroom. But are you creating a great product for your customers? That is the real question here, right? Because in the end, you might be writing code, but if you're not building a product that is a product that can be sold, that customers actually want, well, your company will not exist, right? because they won't have any clients, they won't have a product to sell, and so your team won't exist. And so it means you writing code is non-essential in this case, right? It doesn't matter. And I think that's kind of where we're coming back to that point. And obviously, a few things: stand-up meetings in Scrum. Stand-up meetings, the term comes from extreme programming. In Scrum, we have daily Scrum, right? Hi, Rajashikar. I hope that I'm pronouncing it right. So, by the way, if you have any questions related to what I'm discussing, or you're not sure what I'm kind of the examples or metaphors I'm giving, let me know in chat. So we'll be looking over it there. I know that it's a bit more driven stream, but I'm still open to answer some of the questions if you have something, right? So, and I kind of found this very interesting, this post, right? Like, for example, some of the things that this author is talking about are actually what we're trying to achieve with Scrum, right? He says he advocates instead move fast and break things model where software is deployed and errors fixed as they are discovered. So that is something that we can definitely do with Scrum because we want to deliver as frequently as possible, at least every sprint at a minimum, or multiple times a sprint. So that was kind of interesting for me to go over that. So yeah, an interesting post. Let me put in the link into the chat in case you want to go and read it in more details. Then I found this interesting article. I actually liked how it was written. I like this kind of, language or humor. And so he talks about this person. He actually talks about Scrum is cancer, Linux 6.5, whatever that is. I'm not technical enough to know. So here's it says, this week, Scrum sucks, sources say, and here comes the Linux 6.5 kernel. So Scrum is cancer, right? You're doing it wrong. So many agreed sharing their own anecdata. I love it. Like, it's such a fun post. Sharing their own anecdata, but others said you're doing it wrong. Right? So here he refers once again to this post from Santiago person, right? And what there was actually very interesting comment section, but I believe it was on Twitter though. Let's see if like, I think it was on his Twitter. But basically the discussion around this post, it went around someone said, hey, everything you described is actually not Scrum. So how can you hate on Scrum if actually, it has nothing to do with Scrum and you're doing it wrong? So that's kind of the main thing, you're doing it wrong, that we often like to say, right? And so the author here said, well, if so many highly educated and smart people cannot figure out how to do it, then it's not the problem of the people, it's a problem of the approach. Which I found it kind of weird, because just because many people struggle implementing something doesn't mean that the approach itself is incorrect. It can be flawed, nothing is perfect, but it also doesn't say that this approach completely is irrelevant or cannot be used. A good example of that would be dieting. Right now, we can see that everybody will say, oh, diets don't work. Diets don't work for, I think, 90% of people. People who want to lose weight, they go on all of the different diets and they don't lose weight. So does it mean that diets by default don't work? No. And that even though the percentage of people who are not succeeding with this approach is very high, it's still a good approach and it can still work, right? So it still works for 10% of people. There's got to be something in there. And so in the same, right, we can say Scrum, it maybe works for only 10% of organizations and teams, or 20% of organizations and teams who know what they're doing, who have the right people in place. But just because the percentage of failure is so high doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing it. Another example of that would be entrepreneurship, right? A startup, creating a startup. The percentage of failure for a startup is something crazy, even more than 90%. So more than 90% of startups fail. Does it mean that we should stop creating startups? You know, and I think that's kind of where it comes back to in here. So I think we had some really good people jumping in here, like some good points. Here it says, I've been seeing a trend in rejecting Scrum, but I still do not see a consensus on what to use instead. Some people say Kanban, others say to go back to traditional project management. What is your call at the best alternative to Scrum? And so once again, so the author says, oh, Lean and Kanban works for some teams. Okay, you mean like in the same way that Scrum works for some teams? You're kind of contradicting yourself. So is it by default the best approach and the only one to use, or it just works in some cases and sometimes it doesn't work? Martin is a great product person, so I don't know if you are subscribed to him, definitely go and check him out. He recently released a book on product. Not sure what's it called though. Sorry. Something on product management. Probably a good book. Oh, okay. I can see the someone saying Emma Deldin. I don't think the percentage of failure for Scrum is high. I think every IT project manager was applying Scrum slash Agile without knowing it. Now we have sort of series of documented best practice. Yes, definitely. I think that that is a good point, right? People who are applying it don't actually understand it. So they're trying to apply something. I don't know if you saw my video on Kazakhstan where I went to coach a team on Kanban. And so for them, it was very interesting that their, oh, just EMAD. Okay, cool. That's much easier. Thanks. Yeah, so what they did is actually, it's not the team who implemented their Kanban board. And I don't know if you saw that. They have this very well structured board and they're using it like every day. And actually, it has been created by their managers. And so I kind of asked them, like, how did it come around? Why, like, who created it, right? And they said that the managers wanted to implement something to help the team with their processes, kind of workflow, etc. And they went in and on their own and learned everything they needed on Kanban, right? And so once they learned it, they came back to the team and implemented it, right? And I think what happens now is that people who want to implement it, they're actually not taking the time to learn what they're implementing, right? And so obviously the results are not good. Yes, so Stefan, it's one of the PSTs, so professional Scrum trainers with scrum.org, saying we're not paid to practice Scrum, but solve our customers' problems within the given constraints while contributing to the organization's sustainability. Right? So he says, except for the ceremonies, and he says ceremonies, none of what you mentioned is part of Scrum. Instead, I missed what makes Scrum successful: self-management, technical excellence, and including everyone in identifying what's worth building. Someone sold you snake oil, don't take out your frustration on the framework. So exactly. So someone made you do stupid stuff, right? And I think that is exactly that. I think we go back to what Scrum is or Agile is. It's about self-managing teams, servant leadership, creating high quality products, delivering frequently, um, including everyone in identifying what's worth building, right? So including the technical teams in estimation and refinement and all of these things. So if you have proof that when you implement these concepts, doesn't matter what you call it, these concepts, things don't go well, I would love to see that proof. Please show me a self-managing team that doesn't work. Like, please show me a team that works together on identifying the high importance items to build that doesn't work. I would love to see that because I don't think that actually exists. Greg Meister is saying, they said failed in compared to what? I find it so interesting when people say the metrics gathered once in Scrum prove the failure. My question is, how do you know you weren't failing before? Very good point, Greg. It's interesting as well that what we often say, Scrum doesn't solve your problems. Scrum just makes the problems visible. And I think that's one of those big points to actually say, well, the problems were still there. You had problems, and we'll go back to the post to see what problems they actually had. So you already had problems. They were already there. Scrum just made them visible. By not implementing Scrum, you're just hiding them, but it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be succeeding. So I think, yeah, definitely a good point there. Yeah, so looking back at the post, let's see. The kind of problems they had, I think you kind of look at everything they have very top-down management problem. So they have very strong command and control management. Because we can see management lost it when they found that 500 story points in one project, blah, 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 right? We measured how much it costs to deliver a one story point. What a waste of time. So we have some of that management in here. We prohibited laptops and meetings. We had to stand. It's weird. It feels like there is a lot of that manager present, especially when you say, imagine having a manager, a scrum master, a product owner, and a tech lead. Why do you need so many managers? So many managers, I mean already manager and the tech lead. If we're talking about self-managing teams, self-organizing teams, how is that self-organizing? I don't see any self-organization here. Scrum Master and Product Owner are not anyone's managers unless you put them in that position, right, in your structure, organizational structure. But they're not actually your managers. You had to answer to all of them and none simultaneously. Like, you don't have to answer to the Scrum Master on like what you do on a daily basis, but they will ask you whether you're working in an effective way. You don't necessarily have to answer to the product owner in the same way you would need to answer to your manager, but you would probably need to answer to a product owner on the quality of the product because that's your accountability. Laura is saying, can you please tell the difference between Kanban and Scrum? So Kanban and Scrum are actually just two different frameworks, right? So here we're kind of saying, right, we looked at this comments. Some say Kanban is a good alternative to Scrum. Well, it's just a very different way of doing things. Kanban, as we say, is a pull system. It has its own rules. It has its own workflows to follow. it's just, I can't say it's a framework. They don't really call themselves a framework. They call themselves a method. But kind of just think of it in easy terms. Kanban is on the same level as Scrum. It's just a different type of way of working. That makes sense. So I do have a video on Kanban, by the way, where I talk about it. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out. I think it's called You're Doing Kanban Wrong. Okay, Can See TBB is saying, I thought based on their experience that they don't understand what they do, why they do it, and they think Scrum is fast way to development, and Scrum Master is not fully know how to help people get rid of old ways. Yes, so it seems like the Scrum Master is not exactly the person who knows. Oh, or Scrum Master not fully know how to apply practice in the context of organization. Yes, so maybe they didn't have a very strong Scrum Master who was able to support the team and make the changes on the organizational level, right? Yeah, and also I wanted to kind of point out here in this comment, you're saying they don't understand. Oh, yes, they think Scrum is a fast way to development. So often I kind of say Scrum is not a project management methodology, you know? So often people say, oh, we have a project and we're going to deliver it in Scrum. You already misunderstood what Scrum is for. Scrum is for product development. It's continuous. It's not about delivering a project that has set timelines, budget, and requirements. Scrum is for building high quality products that customers love. That's kind of really the essence of it, right? Scrum is not about delivering projects. Samuel is saying, my product owner is also my manager, and I find it hard distinguishing how I would answer to the same person. Yes, so that is generally a problem. It depends on how, like, your product owner, on the person. What kind of manager are they? And I think you can have a manager in your structure in your organization who is more of a servant leader, who is more there for you and wants to see you grow. If they're more of a command and control type of manager, yes, that is actually very problematic, I'd say. So generally, I never recommend having the product owner or Scrum Master be a manager of the team because it creates a weird dynamic. Like, you need to have everyone on the team on the same level so that they can disagree, so that they can have discussions about and debates about different approaches. But if it's your manager, you might be thinking, I'm not sure I want to actually talk to my manager, you know? So yeah, definitely. That's a bit complicated. Emad is saying, why would a developer interact with product owner? I mean, that is weird for me. Usually developers deal with team leads and there is a Scrum Master or ADL, not sure what it is, whose job is to help them. No, Emad, so okay, let me actually finish whatever you have written. So the Scrum Master deals with product owner so that he would shield the team from any blah blah business stuff and at the same time hold the product owner and team accountable to what is agreed on. E2, great channel, thank you. Yes, so that's a misunderstanding actually about the role of the product owner. Product owner, same as the Scrum Master and same as the developers, is part of the team. All of them are on the same Scrum team. They work together. So developers should totally interact with the product owner on a daily basis because you want to have that communication between here's the business stuff, here's the developer stuff. Like, let's kind of marry them together. So the product owner brings in this business perspective while I feel like the product owner brings in the business perspective while the developers have that tech knowledge behind the scenes that can help the product owner understand the complexity of work, while it also gives the developers a kind of a view into what business needs. So they not only just writing code, they know why they're doing it. They know that stakeholders are happy or not happy, customers are happy or not happy. So they have that feedback. It's not just about, I'm just writing my code in the corner here and I have no idea why, right? They know that they're building a cathedral, and for that, they need a product owner. So yeah, definitely product owner should always be there. Emmanuel is saying, I'm new in this Scrum world. I really want to do it the right way. How can I start? Advice. Well, how can you start? Well, start with simple things, right? If you go to the Agile Manifesto, right? If you go to the Agile Manifesto, starting there, obviously the Scrum guides. So that's the initial reading, I'd say. But to really learn how to do it, I think the best way is to have to kind of watch someone else do it in a company. So if you're working in a company that is implementing Scrum, I think that's a good opportunity to shadow someone, see how it is done. But you might end up actually shadowing someone who doesn't know how it is done. So it's good to go for people who know what they're talking about. For example, professional Scrum trainers with scrum.org have the knowledge, kind of approved knowledge, let's put it that way, to help you learn, right? So going to a class is always a good thing. Then I have lots of videos on my channel that you can check out on what is Scrum and all of this stuff. It's just that it's pretty complex when you're starting out, because you read this Scrum guide and you're like, I have no idea what it means. By the time you got to the Scrum team part, you've already forgotten what you read before. So it can be very complicated to kind of understand, because it's not exactly easily explained to how to apply it. So going to a training is good. Training that I definitely would recommend if you are, this is not sponsored by you, but I am a professional Scrum trainer. But the training that I would definitely recommend if you're just starting out is applying professional Scrum, because you go through the cycles of a sprint and build a product during the class. So that definitely helps you understand like what is that cycle, what does it look like. Kenzie is saying, people thought that Scrum can solve their problem. However, Scrum helped them make the problems visible, and the responsibility to solve the problems relies on them. Exactly, right? That's exactly the whole point. Scrum is not a solution, right? Scrum is just a frame. And then for you to decide how you're going to solve the problems that it uncovers. Rajashikar is saying deliverable and artifacts are the same. Not exactly. So artifacts, in the Scrum artifacts, we have the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment. So we can say that increment technically is the deliverable, right? And so in this case, basically, artifacts cover more ground, right? Because the product backlog is the list of all of the things that you know of that should be built in the product. The sprint backlog is what we want to build in the sprint, upcoming sprint, and the increment is the product itself. So not exactly the same. Okay, GGT is asking, do you recommend boot camps? What kind of boot camps? If they are doing like a cohort where they come together to like build the demo sample product, I think those would be good. What you do need to check is who is giving the training, like who is the trainer. what kind of credentials do they have, you know? So, okay. So here we go back to, wanted to go back to some of the comments that are very funny. Um, so here we say, preach, Conrad. I wish I could upvote you several times. I have a burning hatred for Scrum, and I believe every single one of its creators deserves to be punished. Like, I feel like if you're at this level of hatred towards an inanimate framework, like it's just a concept, like you hate the whole the concept itself, right? Um, go to therapy. Honestly, that's, I think the basically the problem is um people. Like one of the things I often say, any organizational problem is a people problem. And so basically, I think that what this person is actually thinking about, right, is specific people who made their lives a living hell. Like that is what this person is actually talking about. Like, I hate all of them. Basically, that's what it says. And in reality, well, Scrum didn't do anything. Scrum is literally just a framework. Um, okay, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Not exactly, thanks. I've developed a more nuanced view of Scrum. It is a life-cycle batch of meetings that are good for one thing, taking developers who can't or don't want to see the overall business architectural picture and getting useful work out of them. So if you're trying to make a process that can take them and produce an output that scales almost kind of linearly with def count, it sort of works. Not sure I understood exactly what they meant, but here's the point in here, life-sucking batch of meetings. It's just 4 meetings. I mean, if your meetings suck, it's because you're not really maybe talking about what you should be talking. You're not achieving the purpose of the meeting. You don't have the right people in the meeting. It's like, oh, all trainings suck, and the only training you've been to is death by presentation training. No, not all training sucks. It's just that you didn't go to a good training. Same with meetings, right? Everybody hates meetings. I love meetings because the only meetings I attend are the ones that I should be in. And if I shouldn't be somewhere in a meeting or something, I'm not going. You can't explain to me why I should be there. I'm not going. Okay, so I have a few questions in there. E2 is asking, what skills do the product owner needs to be a Scrum Master? I think it doesn't matter whether it's a product owner or like what skills does a Scrum Master need to have? I think that's kind of the question here. And I have so many videos on this, but just a quick overview. It's, well, knowledge, in-depth knowledge of Scrum and some Agile practices, coaching, teaching, facilitation, mentoring. That would be the basis. That's what is needed for a Scrum Master. Rajashikar, I'm confused about what you're speaking. Not sure which part. So some of this will be available in the shorts later, and obviously you can watch back the recording. Okay. Brandon is saying, I'm a former developer that is now over the project management team. We're implementing Scrum and I'm asking PMs to wear the Scrum Master hat. I am a PSM1 and teaching them. Any advice for me? Keep learning. I think the worst that I've seen are the Scrum Masters that get a certification, go to like a class, and then they're like, okay, I know everything. I can totally teach everyone. And they don't continue to learn, because I think this this is how you can grow as a Scrum Master. And I remember, especially the first, you know, years of Scrum Mastery, when I really understood the role, I was spending like a lot of time every working day and sometimes the weekend at, on learning new things, on going out and searching how to facilitate a retrospective and reading 10,000 articles, or just going to forums and reading questions from people. So I always continue to learn, or contacting other Scrum Masters, meetups or whatever that is, and learning from them. Like, what kind of problems did you face? How did you solve it? And always, always remember what Scrum is and what it isn't. Because you might be implementing some practices that you learned. Go back to the Scrum guide and see, is this practice actually a must have? Because maybe it's not working for you. Like, as simple as like, you're going to this page on the scrumguides.org and you're just searching story points. No. History. Okay. Story point. No. It has estimation. No. Estimate. No. So there you go. You can actually find it in the Scrum guide. You just go on this website and you start looking. User stories. No. So just do that, honestly. And if you see something that is not really working for you, maybe it's not as important. But if you're having trouble with some of the key elements in here, say, oh, our sprint planning sucks, it's terrible. Once again, go back to here and say, okay, what are we supposed to do in this meeting exactly? Can we look specifically into that? By the way, if you are looking for like guidance, very detailed guidance, I do have a Scrum Master Startup Guide, which I'm going to pin to the chat. I'm not sure where it appears, somewhere it appears, where I go through a lot of this stuff. Yeah, so just keep learning. There's so many free resources that exist, and obviously some good paid ones, that can help you continue to grow. Yeah, reach out to people who know more than you. Okay, Nuno is asking, hello. So, do you have tips for Scrum Masters who have difficulty to suggest changes on the squad, on the team, more than showing the benefits? It could be a suggestion or video, though. Okay. Difficulty to suggest changes. Oh, you mean like the team doesn't want to implement some of the changes? Thank you, Brendan. Okay. So your team doesn't want to implement changes. It depends on what you're trying to implement. So there are some things that I, as a Scrum Master, am really strict with. As in, we have 4 meetings. I expect the team to be in those meetings. Like, if we have a retrospective, oh, we don't have time, we need to finish it. I don't care. You should have planned better. You can plan it better next sprint planning, but right now we have a retrospective, right? And then so there's some things that I may suggest, like, hey guys, should we do it this way? Maybe it can work. And if they don't really want to do it, they don't see the point of it, like, okay, just a suggestion, and then some things where I can be very, very strict. Like today, I'm working with teams, and we kind of have a weird setup of how we have like release dates. And so it was happening that a release was like a quarter, was supposed to finish in the middle of a regular sprint cadence. And so the teams decided to say, oh, we're going to just extend this sprint to 3 weeks. Normally it's 2 weeks. And I was sitting in a call today with one of the teams, and I'm like, we are not extending the sprint. It's 2 weeks. We're going to plan for that release to be in the middle of the next sprint, but we're not switching the sprints because that is stupid. I didn't say that, but it is stupid because it basically erases all of your metrics, all of the way your team plans. It kind of defeats the whole purpose of a sprint. So we don't extend sprints because it is important for us to be able to have that regular cadence. The more we continue to work in a regular cadence, the easier it will be for the team to understand how much work they realistically can accomplish. And it can also set goals for every sprint. So every 2 weeks, we know we're going to deliver something, and we're going to have a review with our customers, and we are able to adapt immediately after. If we change the sprint length, we kind of lose that point of that cadence. So why don't we just plan for whatever length we want every single time? This time we're going to plan for 3 weeks, next for one, after that for two, right? It's not actually helping you in the long run. So I kind of went into the tangent on the sprint length, but just an example, right? It depends on what kind of changes you're suggesting. And honestly, it is difficult to explain or kind of give you suggestions on what to do because I don't know what the context is. What kind of relationships do you have with your team, and kind of, is my camera focused on me? Okay. So is it specific people who are there? Is it they don't want to change anything at all? Are they actually struggling with something? So it's difficult. Keep working on your relationships with the team, to kind of create more trust between you and them, and focus on what can I do to help you? Like, what pain point can I remove for you? And then go from there, kind of just building that trust. Oh, David Sabine is actually joining. Cue the course of you're doing it wrong. It's exhausting to read stories like this. Teams of people doing bizarre things and blaming it on Scrum. Yes. Thank you, David. It's fashionable to blame Scrum, but unless individuals each take responsibility for the betterment of their team and work environment, those problems will remain long after Scrum is the fashionable scapegoat. Exactly. You're just looking for a scapegoat, and Scrum seems like an easy one, right? Of course, Nuna. I've spoken up in many retros. Okay, this one's kind of funny. Okay, I've spoken up in many retrospectives, but when nothing changes, it's hard to take them seriously. Okay, you've spoken up. What did you do? What kind of changes did you implement personally? What's the point of retrospective if your feedback is simply discarded? Maybe that's where you need to start. Why is your feedback discarded? Let's talk about that. Do you know how to manage conflict in your team? Do you know how to build relationships with your team? You're a team player, right? How do you build those relationships so that your feedback is taken into account? And then it kind of comes back to your Scrum Master. So if your Scrum Master is not doing their job of building trust and in safe environment and self-management, yeah, it's going to be hard. Yeah. Okay. And then I had this post that also came up as at the same time as this post. I'm kind of sad that this post got so popular because it just brought too much attention to it, and it would have been better if that post would have been forgotten. But like looking at the comments on LinkedIn, a lot of people who know what they're talking about are here, giving this post more visibility. I mean, thanks, guys. I think that's great that you're jumping in, but I'm also thinking maybe it should have been better just to leave it in its corner. Okay. Uh, so basically, this one is an interesting one. So he's talking about, hey, we had a great team. We were doing amazing. We had a helping culture, like just self-managing culture, synchronous meets as needed, spontaneous pair programming, direct access to the client, all of the great things that were working. But then we implemented Scrum and we hired a Scrum Master. And then okay, and then basically looking at the Scrum Master is handling the client now. Why? Scrum Master should not be handling the client. Where is your product owner? Are you doing sprint reviews? By the way, Scrum didn't say that you're not allowed to speak to your client directly. You can totally speak to a client at any point in time. Sometimes people say, "Oh, we only have sprint reviews to show our product," you know, and so we only speak to our clients and customers once a sprint. So do we need to like create a separate sprint review in the middle of the sprint if we want to present something to the client, or are we not allowed to show them work in progress? And I'm like, Scrum doesn't tell you that you're not allowed to do that. Just go and meet up with your client if you want to show them something and you want to get their feedback while you're working on something. Scrum is not opposing that. Scrum is not opposing any of this good things that you have listed. After the 3 months, the progress slowed to a crawl, and startup abandoned ship, and customers started complaining for the first time. Now I will just wait for someone to tell me that this wasn't real Scrum either. I don't know what was implemented, to be honest. Like what it seems like your Scrum Master was put as a manager, as a gate. Well, just because this person was called a Scrum Master doesn't mean that they are actually acting in the role of a Scrum Master. And by the way, he says, "Oh, because we were supposed to have the product owner talk to the client instead of the Scrum Master." So, as I said, nothing says that you are not allowed to talk to your customer, but you should have had a product owner and should have a Scrum Master who knows what they're doing, who is able to coach you. Um, yeah. So basically this comment says, yes, a team of people that understands the business and can prioritize well without needing someone to do it all for them. Yeah, it's called a Scrum team. You have the product owner who has the biggest understanding of the business side, and developers who have the biggest understanding of the tech side and how the product works behind, like in the back end. You come together, you discuss, you come up with the best solution. Because I'm just looking for, and I don't know if you guys see anything else in here, but I'm just looking for an example, like an actual example of how Scrum slowed down progress. And what I mean by that is um, we implemented daily Scrum, we started doing daily scrums, and that was interrupting the team's work for 15 minutes, and it created a lot of context switching, and so they were losing an hour a day because of it, because after the daily scrum they needed to get back into their work, for example. That's a very specific example of how something maybe can impact negatively the team. Or I'm actually having trouble giving examples for this because I cannot see any examples that would be that. Um, um, uh, so I'm just trying, if anyone has an example of like a very specific explanation, like, oh, okay, like I finally found what I want to say. Like, correlation doesn't mean causation. And I think this is the problem we're actually having. So there is a correlation between, oh, we implemented Scrum and things weren't going so well, but it's not the same as causation, right? So basically, if we kind of go back to things like, for example, you can find one graph that says, oh, the shoe size has been growing since 2010. So people are buying bigger and bigger shoes. And at the same time, you know that, I don't know, what can I say? I don't know. There were less and less bees in the world since 2010. Like the bees population has been decreasing at the same time as the shoe size was going up. It doesn't mean that the fact that people are having bigger feet is causing the extinction of bees. It makes no sense. Or the other way around. Oh, maybe if we increase the population of bees, then the shoe size will become smaller. It doesn't work that way. And I think this is exactly what we're seeing in here with this. Like, correlation is not causation, you know? Yeah. So very, very interesting, right? When we say here, they're talking about heavy process is fine and necessary if you're building, say, a skyscraper or a nuclear reactor. Yes, we do have that heavy process. It's a traditional project management. Scrum is not heavy process. It's a very light process. Here, okay, Chad is saying human-centric design comes to mind, where a human-centric person is injected into sprints. The first complaint was it's slowing us down, whereas traditional Scrum doesn't include such a person. Yes, yes. And going back to my point that I made earlier, right? Oh, we are developers, we write code, it's just part of your job, generally. You are also part of the team. You need to understand the business side. Where was I? You need to understand the business side, and you need to be a good team member. You need to know how to self-manage your work. All of those things are also part. You need to be able to plan. All of the things are part of your work. Writing code is just one of them. Um, so here it's interesting. So, like looking at this, the proper way to fight Scrum is to measure the time it takes to perform the Scrum ceremonies. It's rarely less than 30% of the total work time in a sprint. 50% seems to be very common. If we look at the maximum amount of hours that you need to spend in meetings as per the Scrum guide, it's actually only about like 13%. So all of those extra meetings you're having, it's not Scrum. So So, like if we look at the time boxes, right? Because the Scrum Guide is very specific. You need to have time boxes. Time boxing is very important. So if your sprint planning is not supposed to take more than 8 hours for a 1 month sprint, you cannot go over 8 hours for a 1 month sprint. And if you're unable to do that, you need to improve the way you plan. Crazy. So if we say it's 8 hours for sprint planning, it is 4 hours for review, 3 hours for um, retrospective, and then we have 15 minutes for every working day. And so that would be, if we're taking a month, we'll take 4 weeks, right? So it's going to be 20 days, like working days. And so it will be 15 minutes by 20, right? So it is 5 hours in total, right? And so it tells me it is equal 20 hours. And so I can't believe that I'm doing math. And so if we look at the 20 days by 8 hours, 20, just to double check that actually, 8 plus 4 plus 3 plus 5. Yes, so 20 hours of total Scrum meetings. And then if we say 20 days by 8 hour work days, 20. It's 13%. Like I'm making it bigger. So what are the rest of this? What are you 50%? What are those meetings? Why do you have them? You know? And I think that is where the problem comes. I think what often happens is that the teams basically are not using their time as successfully as they should be, as effectively as they should be in a meeting, because they come unprepared most of the time. That is the problem. And because of that, they have to have follow-up meetings. And then often what happens, they say, oh, all of these meetings that I'm in, they're part of Scrum. And then you look at the meetings and it is, tech diagram review with the chief architect, meeting with our client to do UAT, I don't know, code review, whatever that is, right? All of those meetings. Those are not Scrum meetings. Those are just general work meetings that you might need to have, or maybe you don't need to have them. If they are not useful, remove them. Okay, so here you go, right? So they had 2 week sprints, and they had a whole day for demo, retro planning, and commitment. So they had all of their end of sprint and beginning of sprint meetings in on one day. So yes, we can say 1 day out of 2 weeks is going to be dedicated to meetings. And so if 1 day, and then we have 10 days in total in a regular sprint, it's 10% of your time. That's fine. You're planning for 2 weeks. I mean, can't you spend at least a little bit of time to try to plan for it? And then he says, oh, there are 2 morning meetings every week to analyze tickets. Uh, which one is that? I don't know. Right? So also 2 mornings for analysis. Like it's not even in the framework. How can you not see that there's no correlation, even correlation between the two? Interesting stuff. So I wanted to add all of these links in here for you if you're interested in learning more. Obviously, I'm not sharing it so that you can go there and write mean comments. Don't do that. But just for you to kind of go over, see what people are replying. I think going into these threads um, could be interesting. So yeah, so a lot of the people are explaining that what he's saying is not there. Okay, great. Oh, I didn't send that. I'm actually unable to send you the link, this link. Oh, maybe I can do that. It was too long. Okay. Anyway, for those of you who are still on the stream, thank you so much for joining. I can take maybe a couple of more questions. So if you have any extra questions, put them right now, and then I'm gonna go for some lunch. Let me go back to my full view mode. Okay. So I'll wait a second here just to see what you guys have in here. If you have any questions, I'll keep reading all this fun stuff. At my job, we have pre-planning, planning, refinement, ultra refinement, and retro. I don't see the pre-planning or ultra refinement, even the refinement. I don't see it here. Oh, Nuno, go ahead. What's your question? There, combine that with daily stand-up and once weekly meeting to just hang out for 30 minutes. What is it called? Check-in with manager? Team meetings? Multiple demos per week with various areas of the company? It has nothing to do with Scrum. Like, no, it's actually has nothing to do with Scrum. Your problem is too many meetings, not Scrum. Chad joined late, but good review. Sadly, more and more are Scrum Master criticisms. Thank you for sharing with us. You know, it doesn't really matter when you really come to that. I think if you're doing a great job, then people who work with you will appreciate it. Honestly, I have only had once in my career a team that like didn't like what I was doing. There was like a lot of hate, and they. But for me, it was more of a problem of relationship building and some just prejudice towards me. I'm not sure. But then all of the other teams I worked with actually enjoyed working with me as their Scrum Master and in Scrum. One person, one person who had never worked in Scrum in one of the companies came to me once at the end of a big release that we had, and he said, "This is the most this is the best way of working I had in my entire career." And this guy has been like in his career for 30 years. Okay, Javier is saying, what is your opinion about safe methodology? It is annoying in my opinion. Uh, I don't have like for me it's the same as Scrum because look, if you go to safe, uh, scaled agile, right? If you go to safe and you look at their principles, they are very good. Like look at the safe principles in here. Okay, take an economic view, apply systems thinking, assume variability, preserve options. All of these are good. So for me, safe is kind of probably misunderstood in a way. Yes, their process looks very complicated. I think they over engineered it a little bit too much. But at the same time, remember, when do we use that? We use that in huge organizations, organizations that have tens of thousands of employees who have huge projects with high stakes. And so maybe they do need that kind of like structure. So I don't have any hate for SAFe, to be honest. I don't know it enough to hate it. And it's also for me like, if we're trying to defend Scrum as a framework for people not understanding it, why aren't we doing the same with SAFe? It's also just a framework. Again, Nuno is saying, how stipulate the sprint goal when there are too many support items to be developed? Well, is your team more of an operations team rather than a product development team? Because if you're working with an operations team, maybe like very, how to say, like very quickly changing type of environment where you are unable to plan even for like a week or 2 weeks, and you have to quickly change priorities all of the time, I would say maybe Scrum is not the right approach. If you can never plan for like 2 weeks, and I'm just saying 2 weeks as most popular sprint length, it doesn't have to be 2 weeks. But if you're unable to, if the nature of your work is such that you are unable to plan for 2 weeks, maybe Scrum is not the right approach. Maybe you should look into Kanban or other frameworks. Think of it that way. And in an emergency room in a hospital, they cannot afford having Scrum because they cannot plan even for one day. They need to reply to emergencies as they arise, you know? So, kind of analyzing whether it's the right one. Okay, Gigi, how you can share? Okay, can you share how you became a Scrum Master, and did you struggle in the beginning at your first role as a Scrum Master? Okay, good question. I am not going to answer it right now because we have an episode of the Agile Audit podcast that is coming out um, in 2 weeks, probably. It's coming out soon. It's coming out soon, okay? So, and in this episode, I'm actually talking about my very first role as Scrum Master. How did I start? How did I grow and came to where I am right now? So I don't want to reply here, and instead want to encourage you to check out our podcast. It will be episode 5, where I'm speaking with Nina. And yeah, no, I mean, it's easier to create the sprint goal when it's innovative software project than adjusting and correcting bugs. Yes, exactly. Just look into kind of the nature of your work. I think you can still plan. It's just if you have, to be honest, if you only have like major, big breaking bugs that come your way all of the time and you need to immediately jump on them to fix them, I would say maybe you should fix your product, because normally it's fine to find bugs, but not the kind of bugs that need to be prioritized immediately, right? And so it's either the nature of the work problem, you're in an emergency room in a hospital, or you're not planning enough, so you're not planning your bugs in advance, or you have problems with the product quality. So fix the problem at the root cause. Let's put it that way. Okay, great. Well, I'm gonna be finishing it up. Thank you so much for joining. I don't know how to end the stream because I know that it's lagging like 20 seconds. So I'm kind of sitting here for extra 20 seconds just in case, to make sure that you guys are receiving all of the whatever I'm saying. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. And I hope to see you in the next one. whenever it's going to be. We'll figure it out. But yeah, look out for that podcast episode and leave me some comments with more questions. I love replying to your comments in my YouTube videos. Thank you, Chad, Nuno, Javier. Sorry, I'm closing the stream at this point, so I will not be replying to that question, but put it into a comment, okay? I usually go over all of my comments.